Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Magicians Without Borders Conversations. My name is Carlos López, and I am very happy to welcome once again Tom Verner. How are you, Tom?
I am great, Carlos. How are you there in Bogota?
Good. A little bit cold, but nothing as cold as you experience over there in Vermont. But anyway, a little bit cold. So
Yeah,
glad to have you to have this conversation.
yeah. This is a wonderful part of my week, getting to talk to you and talk to whoever's listening. And I hope you're out there. And Carlos and I will tell you stories about this amazing organization, Magicians Without Borders.
Yes, Tom. So let's get right into it. When we first did this, the first episode, we talked about how you traveled the world and how you've gone to almost 40 countries and performed for over a million refugees and people in often war-torn places and places that deserve magic but usually don't have
Yeah,
it. And well, now we want to talk about a place in specific, a place that I know is close to your heart, and that unfortunately it's very stigmatized still today, everywhere, and it's El Salvador. So,
yeah.
uh, so I just wanted to say, how or why would you get in your mind that, hey, I want to go to El Salvador, or how did that come about? I'm very interested in that story.
Yeah. Before I say that, I just want to say um, the two most um, what I would call soulful places that I've been
Hmm.
in all these. Actually, it's over 45 countries now
Wow.
that we've traveled to. The two places where the people, to me, and the land in some ways feel so soulful are El Salvador and Guatemala, which the two of them are neighbors, and both of them have suffered so much over the last 30 years, and I'm ashamed to say have been, exploited by my country, the United States.
Mhm.
But anyhow, I just want to say how much I love those two countries. And El Salvador, I've been to maybe now, I think almost 25 times.
Wow,
And
that's a lot.
um, I was introduced to El Salvador in once again, and we've talked about this, Carlos,
Hmm.
in one of those angel moments, what we
Okay,
call
so
angel moments or
those
synchronicity,
serendipitous, yeah, those serendipitous experience
serendipitous moments.
that you
I
don't
I live I
expect.
live way out in the rural part of Vermont, and there's a center here called the Sunray
Hmm.
Meditation Center, and they
Uh-huh.
do meditation retreats and yoga and all those kind of things. And every year they have a gathering of spiritual leaders from various indigenous peoples around the world. And
Okay.
um, one year, around I'd say 2007, I think it was, someone called me, a fellow named Richard Allen, who I
Hmm.
knew, who lived here in Lincoln part of the time. And he said, there are two people from El Salvador who are staying at my house, Nana and Tata. And they're the spiritual leaders of indigenous people in El Salvador. And I'd like you to come over Sunday morning and have breakfast. So I met them. I did some magic with them, and they told me these amazing stories about El Salvador. And we set up, I would come to El Salvador. And this fella, Richard Allen, whose house they were staying at, was connected to a nonprofit in Santa Ana, El Salvador,
Mhm.
called Asaprosar. And
Okay.
that was my introduction both to El Salvador and Asaprosar.
And when you say
Um,
Asaprosar, so Asaprosar works, or it was the first time that you got in touch with a local partner that we now call them, our local partner, where you eventually would do stuff with them, right? We would do not just
yeah,
performing,
I
but
mean,
teaching, right?
yeah, the lifeblood of Magicians Without Borders is connecting with an on the ground local NGO or nonprofit in the many countries we've gone to, as we did in Colombia at Bella Flor, a fundación in Ciudad Bolivar. So anyhow, I traveled down to El Salvador and met the doctor who runs Asaprosar, which is a rural health clinic.
Mhm.
And they have a clinic and they have these things called nucleos, which are kind of preschools,
Mhm.
um, about 25 of those. And then they have an after school program. And when we went there, Dr. Guzman said, would you, we have these centers for preschool children. Would you go and do magic shows for them? And there were, like I said, about 25 of them. And they were way, way out in the rural parts of El Salvador, on coffee fincas, on the sides of volcanoes, in the jungle, really, really out there places. So my wife Janet and I went around for about a week or 10 days and performed for all those kids. And we came back to Santa Ana, and Dr. Guzman, the head of Asaprosar, said, I have one more favor to ask you. We have an after school program, and we work with a group of children called Angeles Descalzos, the Barefoot Angels.
Okay, okay.
And
Ángeles
they
descalzos.
were called, yeah. How do you say it in Spanish? Correct me, please.
Ángeles descalzos.
Angeles Descalzos. So,
Yes.
and the reason they were called Barefoot Angels is that she met them when they were living in a garbage dump and they had no shoes and they were just rummaging through the garbage for things to sell or salvage or eat, unfortunately. But they got them out of that garbage dump and living in Santa Ana and in school. And 12 of them were doing really, really well in school. So she said to me, she said, could you teach them as a reward for doing so well in school, like some magic tricks? And my
Mhm.
wife and I said, sure, we'll do it. So we met for a day with them and we taught them about, a half dozen, six or so magic tricks. And at the end of the day, one of them, there were 12 of them, six girls, six boys. One of
Mhm.
them named Jaime Zumba. And
Mhm.
Zumba said to us, when are you coming back?
And you were like, whoa,
I
whoa.
said, I, we had no plans to come back. We whatever. So I thought about our schedule. This was January, I think 2007. I said, how about if we come back in May? So we went back to May, and we met again with them. And I went back 3 times a year for the next 10 years. And um,
And
they
through those,
became the very,
when
go
yeah,
ahead.
right before you said that they became their first, right? When you say you came back and you came back, what happened every time you came back? Like, what was the logistics in El Salvador? Like, you flew, and then what would you do every time you were back?
Well, we went back, and Asaprosar would set up shows for us in orphanages and schools and different places in Santa Ana. But the main reason we started going back was um, we set up these, what I called, and apparently it's a funny word I made up, um, campamentos,
No,
like
it's a perfect
little
word.
camps. And
That's
they
the
were
word you use.
okay. Um, so we would meet at Asaprosar for Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday. And Asaprosar had beds because people would come from way out in the rural parts of El Salvador and have eye operations, mainly eye operations. The clinic specialized in diseases of the eye. So they had beds there. And so the Barefoot Angel magicians would come, and we'd stay there Friday night, Saturday night, and all day Sunday. And we would learn magic. And that evolved into week-long campamentos that we would hold at some beautiful place. On Lake Cotepeque, there was a camp, and we would bring the kids out there. And then their after school program, the kids who were not necessarily in the Magicians Without Borders magic program, getting to go to the annual big week-long campamento became a way to motivate the kids, the non-magician kids, to do well in school, because we ended up having maybe a dozen kids in the magic program, but 50 kids at the campamento, where we would do theater and magic and juggling and art and soccer, football. And so anyhow, that grew and grew and grew, and it became the first of, now we have 7 around the world, education programs where we take young kids, get a local magician, and use magic to help them develop self-confidence and discipline and focus. And so there's the bear. Oh, descalzo.
That
There's
that
the barefoot
that's a
angel.
little picture that I'm sharing now for those of you who might be listening later in the podcast. This is a wonderful picture taken by someone that I'm going to introduce you later. But this is the Angeles.
Yeah.
This was I guess sort of the headquarters, or where they had like their little permanent place in Santa Ana.
They had a very simple place, and it was surrounded by walls, because it was a pretty dangerous, difficult place, near the bus terminal. And
Mhm.
it's so nice to see these faces. There's Maricela, and oh, anyhow, they would go there after school, and the Angelistas Descalzos would work with the younger kids and help them with their schoolwork. They would do their schoolwork, and that's where we would teach them magic, at this place that Asaprosar had um, in Santa Ana.
Okay,
Yeah.
and when you were doing that, it was mostly you and Janet, right? You and Janet were the ones that traveled, but eventually you started getting more people involved. At
Yeah.
which time did you say, "Hey, I would like to have more magic teachers there," or was that something that happened in another situation? Like, where was this thought of saying, "Hey, I want more magic teachers," or
I
where
I
did that opportunity came about?
Yeah, I really, really wanted more magicians to get involved because, as I said, the camp was getting bigger. And even though there were only like a dozen Magician Without Borders kids who worked with magic every time we went down there, during the campamentos, we might have 3 magic sessions with 12 kids in each session. And it was just too much. And I also didn't speak
The
you know,
Yep.
Spanish. So in 2010, I believe it was, or 2009, I went to the International Brotherhood of Magicians annual meeting in Nashville, Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the highlights of that convention was a competition among young magicians. And there were maybe 10 magicians who had created these amazing, I think they were 7-minute acts or 10-minute at the most acts. And they were pretty good. And the 5th one, I think about halfway through, this guy came out and he did an amazing magic act about his life in the gangs. And then he met this magician at a magic shop in New York City where he lived, but he was getting caught up in gang life. And he met this magician and he started doing magic, and he talked about and illustrated it with his magic, how magic saved his life and got him out of the gangs. And I'm sitting there watching this, and his name was Devante. And I thought, oh my God, these kids in Santa Ana are struggling with people in the gangs approaching them and trying to get them into gangs. And this guy would be amazing with these kids. And he happened to be a Dominican. So he spoke fluent Spanish also. So they announced the winners of the competition, and Devante didn't win. I was amazed he didn't win. It was such an emotional, moving, powerful performance and life story. But I hate to say this, but I don't think the magicians were ready for that kind of emotional storytelling. I think they wanted multiplying billiard balls and, whatever,
Technical stuff,
card
right?
productions. They couldn't quite handle the power of Devante's show. And actually, I talked to a couple of the judges afterwards, and they absolutely said that. So after the announcement of who won and who didn't win, I went over to Devante and I introduced myself, and I told him about Magicians Without Borders and about El Salvador. And I just said, I think from what I saw and what I felt you would be amazing with these kids. And I'd love you to come to El Salvador. And then he said one of the most wonderful things. He said, I thought I came to Nashville to the IBM convention to win this competition. But now I realize why I came to Nashville was to meet you and go to El Salvador. Oh, it was amazing,
Wonderful.
And he ended up coming and bringing this amazing guy with him, and many, many times. So that's how.
Cool. That's a pretty cool
Yeah,
story.
go ahead. Yeah,
That's a pretty cool story about how you were went to some place for a magic convention, and this connection happened that neither of you were expecting, and it was pretty wonderful to see, and the impact that it has, it left on Magicians Without Borders for sure, because right now
Yeah.
we can see the ripples of that connection. And talking with about that connection, you said that he was bringing another guy with him to this to El Salvador. What were your first impressions about this guy, and how did you meet him?
Well, he came to El Salvador, and Devante said his name was Six. And I thought that was a kind of strange name, Six. I liked his other name, Michael Muldoon, because my family is all Irish. And I thought, oh, Muldoon, maybe he's Irish. And so anyhow, he said, I want him to come. He's a great guy. And I met this wonderful person named Michael Six Muldoon. And he can, I'd like to tell you why he calls himself Six, but maybe you know,
maybe
I don't know.
Maybe he'll
tell us.
But before we bring him on, because he's our guest, I want to show you guys.
Oh my God, he's here. Okay.
I want to show you guys a video that he made of his trip to El Salvador. So we're going to show that video, and afterwards we're going to bring him on. So here's the video. Awesome. So that's a video made by this guy that we're gonna introduce right now. So welcome, Michael Six Muldoon. How are you?
I am doing well, guys. Thank you so much. So happy to be here. So happy to see your wonderful faces.
Yes,
it's been far too long, my friends. Far too long.
Oh, yes. Long time.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I guess so. Anytime Tom speaks, I get so lost in his stories that I was like, oh, I gotta go on in a second. But I'm just like, yeah, tell me more, Tom. Tell me more.
God, that video. Oh, it's so good to see you. Brought tears to my eyes. It's just so beautiful.
Yeah, it's a long time.
That young woman who did that Buddha screen, the purple triangle. She was
Karen. Was it Karen?
Just so. I think it may have been Karen.
Yeah.
But she was so shy and she couldn't say anything. And somehow you and Devante working with her just brought her out of herself, and she got out there. God, that brought that whole thing back to me.
So this is
it was beautiful.
A child that we worked with, who literally for like 4 days just said nothing to anybody. and just wouldn't respond, and wouldn't really speak in Spanish or English, nothing. Just. And at first we were like, well, does she communicate? Like, what's the issue? And you start to find out about her story a little bit, and you realize she's had a lot of trauma in her life. And the amazing moment, because I remember this. I think we were on the beach when this happened. So we had Campamento in a few different places, and we ended up doing it at the beach one year. And that in itself was amazing, because just many of these kids have just never seen water, never got to go to the water. So they were like, just to see the ocean, it was just like, to them, they were just having the time of their life, and just to be a part of that experience alone. But I remember specifically Karen just wouldn't communicate with anybody, and we just like, well, what do we do? And everyone was like, oh, that's just her, and whatever the case is. And we taught her this effect, in which it's you show a piece of basically cardboard, you show it front and back empty, and you fold it into a triangle, then you reach inside and you pull stuff out. And we all did a practice run. So we taught the class. I think it was myself or Devante. One of us taught the class at the time, because I think it might have been me, because these are items that we got donated from Phantasma Magic at the time when I worked with them. They were nice enough to send us a bunch of magic sets to bring to the kids, and we always taught it, and then the kids got to take turns to go up and perform it as a practice. And when she got up to perform it for the group, it was just, everybody lost their minds. A, she spoke for the first time. B, she added such small subtleties that were absurd. So she like lifted up the screen and reached inside and patted her hand on the table and showed nothing was there, and then put it down, and then reached inside and made all this stuff appear. And to say we all looked at each other in just complete disbelief would be an understatement. It was an insane moment, and obviously one that Tom and I would never forget, for sure.
Yeah. I think I remember now. I think her brother refused to join a gang or something and was killed in front of her.
Yes.
The gang came into their house and killed her brother right in front of her, and she just regressed into herself. And
I think it was two people. I think either her mother or her father was also killed. I think the first time they went to the house and the brother ran away, like the mother told the brother to run away, and then they ended up killing somebody there. And then they came back another time, and he was there, and they killed him that
That's
time.
right. That's right. It was just horrible. And it was just a very powerful example of how magic just enabled her to find a way to literally speak and to express herself,
And that's not the first time I've heard this from any magician who does this kind of work. I've heard many stories of just kids who refused to speak, and somehow magic became the language that they were willing to communicate through. It shows you it's more than tricks.
Yeah, magic and the performance gives them the confidence to step up and perform as something different that they have performed all their lives. All their life, they might have been a introverted, quiet, all tied up. But when they're performing, you can literally see them become someone else, and that's so powerful.
And that's part of what we did. That's part of what we did in El Salvador, is that when Devante brought me along, part of that story, he shared that his name isn't actually Devante. That's not his name that he was given at birth, and everyone knew me as Six, and obviously I don't think any parents are naming their children after numbers. Not yet, at least. It might become a trend soon. But I think, we did a thing where we did an exercise and where everyone had to create their stage name, and it allows you to create this alter ego, and you get to become this different person on stage. And you really can become anything you want, right? Like, you're not limited by your own mental beliefs that you may have of yourself or the social constructs that surround us in this world. So they were able to go anywhere they wanted, and they created their own unique names. And, we wanted to pass that on to them, that you can really be anything you want in this world, and it's not just on stage, because the world is your stage.
Awesome. That's such a wonderful story. And well, that happened while you were there, and all the work you did prior to that. But I want to take you back to the first time. When was the first time that you heard of Magicians Without Borders? How was that?
This is crazy. This is a crazy story. And when Tom speaks about meeting Devante, he kind of says this is fate. This is the world doing its own magic. And I think I agree with this, because
what a wonderful way to say it.
Yeah. And I was supposed to be in El Salvador, not in El Salvador, at the IBM convention that Tom and Devante were at, and I was supposed to compete alongside Devante. This is part of a documentary that was being filmed that came out later, became a movie called Magic Men, which is available on like Netflix and all that, I think, and all that stuff, and like Amazon. And part of this was us filming. There was like 3 of us that were supposed to go there and compete in this competition. And what ended up happening was I couldn't go because it was either, I forget what day it was, but I was writing a paper for a college paper, something about, I think it was like an application to like do a transfer to like Vassar University or something like that. And I just got really sick. Like my body just felt weird. I was getting changed to go to class. I go to take my shirt off to switch my shirt, and I just get a sharp pain. I start sweating, and I just know something's wrong. So I hop in a cab and I go to my brother's house because I was home alone. And I was like, I just had to find somebody to be near. I didn't want to be alone at the moment. And I get to my brother's house, and he's just like, "What's going on? Try to eat something, drink something." And my niece, who was probably like 2 or 3 at the time, like just came running up to me, like so excited to see me, like tapping on my leg. And I just like told her, like, "You have to leave me alone." And I would never speak to her like that. And in that moment, I knew something was definitely wrong. So I told my brother, call an ambulance. I have to go to the hospital. And they rushed me into a hospital, and they start freaking out. Like the nurses start freaking out. The EMTs or the paramedics, whichever they were, took me to the front of the line, which was weird in of itself. They rushed me into a cardiac room because at first they think I'm having a heart attack. So they strap me to all the machines, and they're like, maybe he's having a heart attack. And at this time, I'm 18 years old. So they strap me to the machines, and no heart attack. That seems fine. Then they take my blood, and then he's asking me questions like, when was the last time you had sex or intercourse or this, that, the other? I was like, what's going on here? It's like, well, maybe this is HIV. And I was like, well, what? Like, so now I'm start panicking with that. That comes back negative. So now they have no clue. They went to the 2 major sources that they jumped to, and they were like, neither one is the case. We don't know what's happening. So they said, we're going to send you for a CAT scan because you keep complaining about stomach pains. We're going to send you for a CAT scan. Actually, they sent me for the X-ray first, I believe. Send me for an X-ray. And when I stood up to take the X-ray, I just passed out. That's it. I was just out. I woke up and I told the guy, like, hey, we need to do the X-rays. Like, it's already done. We already did it. We're rolling you out of the room already. So they picked me back up, and they did it while I was sitting. And then they said, they seen blockage, and they didn't know what it was. So they go for a CAT scan to get a more detailed look. And after that took place, I couldn't even lift my arms. I was like screaming as I was trying to lift my arms above my head. I was in so much pain just to get into the CAT scan. And it ends up that I had a pooling of blood in my stomach. So they said, we're going to wait to see if it stops. You have some kind of internal bleeding. We don't know what's causing it. We're just going to see what happens. Early in the morning the next day, the doctor comes in, and she's just screaming, yelling at the nurses, hurry up, pull this, get him, we're going in. And she hands me a piece of paper, and she says, I need you to sign this paper. And if you don't, you're probably going to die. And I need you to sign it now. And I started laughing. And she said, why are you laughing? And I said, because I'm in the right place. I'm exactly where I need to be. And that moment, I felt like everything was meant to be in that moment. I was in a safe space. I signed the paperwork, and literally from the moment that I signed the paper to 4 minutes later, maybe if that, I was inside of a silver room ready to go surgery. And they did a exploratory surgery where they just cut me down my abdomen, and they took out all my organs, drained all my blood that was pooling in the stomach, and they looked through each organ to figure out what it was. And it turns out that it was my spleen that ruptured, and it was 3 times the size. And I lost so much blood that I probably would have died within the next few minutes, she said, if we didn't get into surgery, because my blood count was so low. So they had to do a number of blood transfusions in order to give me my blood back. And that's why I missed that specific trip. But here's where it gets strange. Now, here's where the fate aligns, because I was in the hospital.
Sounds like a good excuse not to go.
Yeah, that's a good excuse. Yeah. I just had this idea in the hospital. Like, I realized that people were donating blood to save me. Like, somebody gave blood to save me. This is crazy. So one of the ideas that I had in the hospital was like, you know what, I'm doing this magic thing for money and because I love it and to make a living. But I was like, forget about doing this for money. Forget about doing this for a living. Do it because you love it, and do it to give back to the world. So I had this idea for starting a nonprofit organization called Magic for Life. And this is while Devante is out in IBM meeting Tom. So Devante comes back a week later. He visits me in the hospital, and he's like, dude, you're like, oh my God, you okay? This, that, the other. And I'm like, Yeah, but I had this idea, for creating an organization called Magic for Life, and like we use magic to give back. So maybe we do shows and we raise money to donate to the blood donor organizations or whatever the case is. And like his face in that moment was just shocked. He was like, no, he's like, what? You won't believe this. Like, I just met a guy who runs an organization called Magicians Without Borders, and he invited me to El Salvador. I'm going in a couple of months or a couple of weeks. I remember it was like pretty recent after the convention. He was like, yeah, I'm going. I think it was like a September that he went or something like that. So it was probably a couple of months, or maybe he's like, I'm going next month. So I'm going to go. I'll check it out. It's weird. He just told me to meet him at the airport. So I'm just going to meet him at the airport. And he's like, I'll talk to him and I'll tell him about your idea. It's like, why recreate the wheel when one's already spinning? So Devontae took that first trip and he spoke to Tom and, told him about what I do. And I think Tom and I communicated by email a few times. And then, they invited me to the next trip right after that. And, then it became part of my life. And I mean, to this day, it still is. It's like, it's so embedded in me. Magician Without Borders it's almost like a way of life in many ways. And, it's almost hard to explain how it shaped me as a human being. And even to this day, like it dictates the things that I do and the way I think about stuff in the world. But that's the fate that aligned me with Devontae in that situation, with what the idea that I had. I mean, I could have had a different idea and went the other way and said, I can't do this. This is crazy. I mean, I got to get a real job that gives me health insurance and protects me. But I wanted to give back to the world. And Devontae just happened to meet Tom. And it all came full circle. And it's a really beautiful story.
Wonderful to hear. Wonderful how that, it's so hard to imagine what you felt or what you went through, but that, very heavy situation that happened turned out in a kind of revelation kind of thing, like I wanted you use this for good, and that, empowerment that you get when you want to use something for good and then something else happens, like, look, here's the opportunity,
yeah,
do you want to take it, do you want to go? So when you heard the words, let's go to El Salvador, right? And it's like next week or next month, or
no, I had to be a while because Devontae had to go first, but because my surgery was so severe, I couldn't go anywhere for like 3 to 6 months. So the first trip ended up being in March of 2010, and I think Devontae and Tom met probably in probably July. Had to be that summer, July of 2009, and right. That's why he probably went to the September trip or the January trip, and then I probably had to take that 3 to 6 months to heal, and I was probably able to go my first trip, and that ended up being that March trip.
Okay, yeah. and when you hear like it's going to be in El Salvador, right? Like, what were your first thoughts on it? Like, are you really gonna go to El Salvador? Did it sound like, okay, let's go to El Salvador? Like, how did it sound?
It sounded exciting. I was like, yeah, let's do it. Like, why would I question this? And I didn't know much about El Salvador, to be honest, at the time. I mean, I was just 18, and I grew up in New York City, and I grew up in a predominantly Spanish neighborhood. I grew up in Ridgewood. I went to school in Grover Cleveland and Ridgewood, Queens, which is borderline Brooklyn, Bushwick. So predominantly Puerto Rican, Dominican, and different Hispanic and Latin cultures. And so I was excited because I'm so used to the people and the language and the food. I love it. I was like, oh, let's go. And then Devontae started giving me the information of like, so here's what's happening there in El Salvador. And it's the MS-13, the world's largest and most dangerous gang, operates there. And they basically run everything. And we're going to probably the most dangerous portions you can be in. And, it's not going to be as easy as it seems. It just, I was still excited because when you want to give back, you want to give back, and you want to do so despite whatever faces you.
Okay, yeah. Good. And when you were feeling like, okay, this is where we're going, this is where it's at, what were your expectations going to it? And once you were there, what was, the reality versus expectations?
Yeah, I'm not sure what my expectations were. I remember I was asking Devontae tons of questions, like, what's happening? Like, what do I do? What do I wear? What do I pack? I don't know. So I wasn't too sure what to expect. But, I just went ready for whatever came. And then when I got there, it was I wouldn't say it wasn't what I expected, because I didn't know what to expect, but it definitely felt different. You know, coming from New York, and it really was a world apart. Like, you really couldn't. I mean, anyone who's ever been to El Salvador, everything is very much low. You don't have tons of high risers. I mean, maybe in San Salvador, but even then, their tallest buildings are not nearly as tall as Manhattan and Times Square, where we have towers on top of towers on top of towers. So that was the first change. I remember it being super humid and sticky. As soon as we got off the plane, it was hot. The airport was nothing like the airport in New York. It was like all windows open, every low ceilings, and it's just sticky and humid no matter which direction you turn. And it was just these. It was amazing. Like, it was almost like a sensory overload, because it was so different. So I was just taking everything in, like, wow, like I can vividly remember the windows they had in the airport. Like, they're not like these big giant single windows. It's like those ones with like those plank, I guess, glass. So it's like these layers of glass that kind of all turn individually, so you can kind of see through all of them. It was those kind of windows. And I remember the guards in like their dark, I forget if it was black or like a Navy uniform. They looked like military. Like, it wasn't like police. It was like, okay, that guy's got a machine gun and he looks like he just came out of a tank somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember, I just remember that my one of my first like wow moments in El Salvador was like we came to the airport, and we were driving to San Salvador, and you pass a town called Oloquinta, which they sell the most wonderful pupusas, which is a popular food from El Salvador. That's this kind of like tortilla thing with stuff inside. It's just wow. It can be made out of rice or corn. It's just delicious. And we just parked in this place, like right by the road, super simple, right? And then a guy comes, like it's usually in South America or Latin America, to say, hey, I'll look after your car while you're eating your pupusa. And this guy just looking out for your car, but he was holding on to a machine gun. And you're like,
yeah.
That was like a huge.
All parking lots had guys with machine guns or shotguns or something to the effect.
Yeah,
right.
That's a little bit heavy. But once you were there, right, you started doing all what we just heard Tom talk, right? You went and did some shows. So I'm just showing some pictures.
Oh my goodness.
Wonderful. Do you remember something about this place? Do you remember after asking this mini question, like, what do I do? What do I wear? What do I pack? What magic do I do over there?
Yeah. That's a good question. What magic do I do over there? Because I'm a talker. I talk a lot. So you throw me on stage and I'm going to talk, and that was not optional there. And I remember Devante saying, like he gave me so much credit as a performer, because he said he was so impressed with who I became when I had to perform there. He said my facial expressions, just the way I interacted with the kids, it was so funny. And he said, I don't know how you were able to do it without saying a single word. So I brought all the visual magic that I can do, and I really played up the body language to make it funny. And it really hit. This was a school that we went to go perform in. I don't remember what town it was, but I do remember the school, and there was a lot of kids, and we got some really cool pictures there. And as you can see, Tom was taking a picture of me. I wonder where that photo is, Tom. I wonder.
I think
the other angle.
I'm pretty sure that's a school in Santa Ana.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
And it's something that has happened to me when I've been to El Salvador is that this kind of performances spaces are super particular, because you're so far away from the kids, because they're sitting on the shade.
Yes.
As you see in the picture, right? So the you're on the stage, full on heat, and the sun with you.
Yeah, I look like this shirt. This is what I look like. This by the end of that performance.
Of course, because you have to perform there, but the kids don't want to sit in the sun, obviously, because it's too hot. So
look at us wearing all black, like brilliant men that we are. Absolutely brilliant.
It's hard to do, and here you are again, with a volunteer, and all of them sitting in the shade, and you're
I was sweating so much. It was like just sweat dripping off my face. There wasn't enough water in the world for me at that time. It was crazy. There's some crazy moments in El Salvador. I tell you that. There's just moments that heat will get to you faster than you realize. But in performance, you don't feel it. But once you get off that stage and you get 30 seconds to cool down, the adrenaline goes away, and that hurts.
Yeah, but it's wonderful. I mean, those. Do you have any particular stories of something that in one of those performances, you realized something, or you did something that you didn't expect?
Oh man, I got embarrassing ones, and I don't know which way I should go with this.
Whichever way you want.
I almost feel like it wasn't this place. We went to somewhere very rural, like just off in the woods somewhere, and they were building it. They were building it. It was just getting built up, and we were getting ready to perform, and I was like 15 minutes before I had to go on, and my stomach was, again, the heat gets to you, and my stomach was just hurting so bad, so bad. So I run to the restrooms they're just building, to go to the bathroom, and there's just, you do what you have to do, and your stomach hurts, you try to make the best of it, and there's no toilet paper. There's no toilet paper anywhere, and you go to the next. I try to run to the next one and see maybe there was no toilet paper to be found anywhere in the vicinity, and I can hear them oh, where's Six? It's almost time for him to perform, and I want to go perform with one sock that day, so.
Great.
I gotta see if I can find a picture of me with just one sock on. I have to look through the images. It might be there. It's so funny.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and then there's scary moments. I remember one time we were performing an outdoor show for the small village, and you just seen a guy. There's a fence in the background, and you seen a guy face tatted up just come up to the gate, and then another guy comes up face tatted up, just lean up against the gate, and they're just watching us from the distance. And usually that's the international sign for some kind of gang relation, whether it's MS-13 or South 18th Street. And a part of you definitely gets a little nervous because okay, they're keeping an eye on what's taking place over here, and they're going to have some questions as to who we are and why we're here. But at some point they just started laughing, and they just saw people were having a good time, and they left it alone, which was nice, So you can't always have a negative perception of people.
Yeah. Peter, one of the Barefoot Angels, I asked him that. I said, what is your relationship with the gangs? Because the place where we gathered there near the bus depot was a very heavily populated MS-13 area of Santa Ana. And he said the gang members seem to have a kind of respect for us and what we're doing for the community. And I really love that, because there was also a part of me that felt like Peter and Maricela and Zumba, and these were really cool kids, and they were doing magic. And I thought, oh, damn, maybe the gangs are going to want to pull them in, these cool kids. But there was just what Six just said. There was something. The gangs kind of left them alone. Once they started performing in the community, the gangs felt, they were really doing something good, and they respected them, which
that's so cool. That's so cool. Here I'm seeing this picture it's one of the kids of Maricela.
Yes.
And she's just performing, and seeing that, I don't know if you, Six, or Tom can comment on what's it like to see one of these kids, perform for the first time. Like when you see them perform for the first time, what are you feeling? What are your emotions while that's happening?
Yeah, well, the mission of Magicians Without Borders is entertain, educate, and empower. And the person who came up with that is with us tonight. Six, I was sitting somewhere, we were having lunch or something, or just talking, and he said, the mission of Magicians Without Borders is to entertain, educate, and empower. I thought, oh my God, that's perfect, and they all begin with E. I mean, it's just such a wonderful way to sum up what we do. And when I look at Maricela doing this trick called backstage, which was a trick we brought down, someone donated it, and
That was actually mine from my shows I used to use. I
oh,
gave her
was that
mine.
yours?
Yeah.
And she just took to it, and it seemed like the students would take to one trick or another, and for some reason I forgot you had brought that down.
Mm-hmm.
But it was this wonderful trick, and it just somehow the trick and Maricela connected in a way that it was the first trick I can remember. Also, there was only one of those.
Yes.
So she was the only one who did it. So it became her trick. It became her way of performing. And it just empowered her. It was absolutely what Six had said. She learned the trick. She, through the education of learning the trick, it just empowered her. And then it empowered her in other ways, because she ended up saying, along with Peter, I would really like to be a chef. And she ended up going to a culinary school in San Salvador, the best one and she's still doing cooking to this day. And
I think she's engaged now, right?
And I'm not sure how that engagement is going. It's hard to keep track of love lives. But when I look at that picture and I see her in front of those kids, because a lot, not quite like Karen, who we were talking about earlier, but Maricela, like a lot of women, unfortunately, in Latinx kind of countries, are kind of taught to step back, and the men sort of are the ones who step out. But she really stepped out, in a fantastic way. So
Yeah,
she's the embodiment of what Six called entertain, educate, and empower.
yeah, absolutely. And I remember that, you made a great point about how everyone kind of became their own unique effect. That was one of my effects that I had. I used to do in my kid shows I used to do kid shows when I started in magic, and then eventually I wanted a more corporate adult and mentalism, mind reading stuff. So I was using my items there, and I just saw these kids like enjoying the stuff that I did. So I was like, you can have it, you can use it, and then like I just couldn't take it back. It just wasn't happening. So there's a few things like there was a vanishing bottle that somebody ended up using. I remember Zumbito always used to do the peanut butter and jelly trick. So
absolutely,
everyone used to get their own trick and add their own personality to it, and it was absolutely special and absolutely amazing. And remember we talked before about the names and like how the power of a name and alter ego. Well, if you look at her shirt on the back, it says the Magic Power, and those are shirts that they created, and they created their own group while we were back in the States, and they were doing their own thing while they were there, and ended up forming their own group called the Magic Power, and coming together and uniting why we couldn't be there. And I think that's so special too, when you can give them the ability to work on their own and make it their own. And at that point you don't really need us anymore. And then and that's the beautiful thing, right? You pass on these skills and this thinking and this way of being that truly becomes theirs, right? We were just the push, and then they took it from there.
A really wonderful kind of odd thing. Oh, beautiful.
Look at those drinks, Tom. You remember those drinks? I don't think anybody, after a couple of those, nobody remembers anything.
That's the margarita from heaven. Oh my God.
It's bigger than my head, and I have a big head.
Something interesting what Six just said was they created this kind of magic club, and they called it Magic Power. And at the exact same time, in Mumbai, India, the kids we were teaching there created a magic group called Jadui Shakti, which means magic power. And they had no communication with each other, but doing magic somehow empowered them. And they didn't know the mission of Magicians Without Borders was education and empowerment. But we learned that from them. We saw that they were getting empowered. And it's just fantastic.
That's so cool. And for me, this picture that I'm showing is just Six with a couple of kids, and then Six, Devontae, and Tom with this huge margarita glasses.
We're good role models, as you can see.
But you can't work. You can't work all the time.
And that's where I'm getting, right. Like you said, you sometimes feel like, hey, when you see them perform, the kids that we teach too, and they become their own selves on stage, and they develop this new persona that can perform and that feels empowered and all that. You feel like that joy and that of a job well done, right? And I think that's so powerful. And I wanted to ask you this last question, Six, and it's like, do you think Michael Six Muldoon, even though you've talked about this before, but do you think Michael Six Muldoon is different because of the experience he lived with Magicians Without Borders? And if so, in what way?
Wow. It's to say different would be an understatement. I would go as far to say Michael Six Muldoon is who he is because of Magicians Without Borders. Because I think a part of me lives that mission to entertain, educate, and empower. So, at one point I wanted to go back and finish my own schooling. So when I first got involved, as I said, I was doing some schoolwork. I was finishing up my associate's degree, but I actually ended up traveling with the organization for a few years before going back and getting the last 2 classes that I needed that I didn't get because I had to withdraw for the surgery. And then I was like, I just always wanted to go back and finish. So I went back, 4 years ago, it actually started. I went back and I finished my undergrad. So I got my bachelor's degree. That was 2 years ago. I finished that. And then I just, for the last 2 years, and I just this past August, finished my master's degree in teaching. So I think the entertainment or edutainment, however you want to aspect, is always there. I always want to entertain, and obviously the education and empowering is always what I'm working towards, right? And a lot of it stems from Magicians Without Borders because I was always traveling with Tom to do these things, and I was like, well, what am I doing in my own neighborhood? Where am I giving back to the people that I grew up in? And even now, it's just weird how the world aligns you because I happen to end up working in a school, Newtown High School in Queens, New York, which is in the Elmhurst, Corona, which became the epicenter of the epicenter. Like New York City is considered the epicenter, and the hardest hit part of all of New York was Elmhurst. It was literally Elmhurst Hospital, which was on the news all the time, is 2 blocks away from my school that I work at. So this impacted all the students that I work with, all their families, and all my coworkers. And a part of me, you normally you would feel some kind of despair, but with all my experience with Magicians Without Borders, you see opportunity here. You see how A, you can help, and B, how you can help people realize that you can find empowerment through these difficult situations. And that carries with me to this day. And the good news is that now I'm excited because now I definitely want to get back more involved with Magicians Without Borders because now I finished the degree. I mean, it's very hard to do a degree and work full time and work with Magicians Without Borders. So 4 years ago, I had to put a kind of hard stop to working with the organization. And now it's now I feel free. This is the first time that you said, hey, can you do something at 7:00 after work? And I can do it because every other day I was coming home to write a paper or do research. And I was just you had no time. And I could just come home at 3:00 in the afternoon. I'm home and just hanging out, just whatever I want. So now I can find the time to give back. And part of that is doing a YouTube channel where I teach magic in order to help people learn magic in a proper way and give credit to the people who created these things and magic history. Also to reach other people who, for whatever reason, that I can't reach. So now this allows me to expand my reach. And then I talked to Tom, I think it was last month, and we had a great conversation about other ways in which I can help. And now that I have the time and now that I have a proper income, that helps a lot too, right? I don't have to rely on magic for my income. So now I can make time and contribute financially to the organization. And bring things full circle. This is the dream.
So cool, so cool. Six. I mean that you went through with all this education of yours, and I see how this. Whenever we talk about education, and you talk about your teaching, your eyes light up, and you're very
Yeah.
and that's so cool to see you fulfilling this.
Yeah.
And
Let me add one thing to that. I want to add one thing to that, and then and a lot of it is the impact that specifically Tom had. Tom is a professor at university, and he always, you just start to realize like the way he thought about the world and the way he spoke about the world, it just made you want to be better. It made you want to look and and find the things that you aren't doing. And a part of me was like, we're trying to tell these kids that you can do whatever you want and you can overcome anything. And here I wasn't even finishing degrees that I had access to, right? I had full access to it. I wasn't completing it. And how do I go and tell a kid you can do this and do that? And I wasn't doing it myself. So part of me felt that I had to do it to prove to the kids that, hey, listen, like we can all do it. And I say that because, a lot of people don't know that I was actually a high school dropout. I dropped out of high school. I didn't graduate high school. I dropped out and got my GED. And now the world, again, as we said, fate aligns. And here I am now, a high school teacher. I finished my undergrad with a 4.0 GPA. I finished my master's with a 3.8 GPA. I mean, just to come full circle and like, you realize that like maybe I didn't fail high school, maybe high school failed me, and now I want to be the difference to somebody who's in the same situation that I was. That goes whether it's in El Salvador or whether it's in New York. So I want to take a second to thank you, Tom, for being such an incredible inspiration, for believing in me, the magic that I did, and I'm completely grateful for everything we've done together. I love you. You are an incredible human being, and I look forward to many more years of working together, creating, and giving back to this world.
Thank you, Six. Something that came up when Six and I were talking, a few weeks ago was, and I think it's one of the gifts that's going to come out of this pandemic is that because we're not able to travel. I think Carlos and I would probably have been in El Salvador if it wasn't for the pandemic and other places. But it's making me think more and more about what we can do, not only around the world, but here, in North America. And that involves, in my imagination, Six, you and Devante and like Ryan Bart, who started the program in Colombia. He's resurrecting our Warrior Wizard program because he's stationed for 5 years on a base, and he's going to start training disabled American wounded vets, PTSD vets, how to do magic so they can perform in the hospitals. But we're going to do some stuff together. We're not finished. That's for sure.
That was just the warm up, Tom. Now this is go time now.
El Salvador was a rehearsal. So here we are. Okay.
Pretty cool. So it was pretty nice having you here, Six. Thank you so much for taking the time.
And Carlos, thank you. I just want to say thank you because just the work that you've done from the moments that I left, and like, you don't know where things are going. And a part of me was always like, oh, what's going to happen? And then meeting you and just like, wow, this is in good hands. And you, not only did I have high expectations, you blew those high expectations out the water and made me realize that my expectations were very low with everything you've done for the organization. So thank you so much for keeping the dream alive, really, at the end of the day. And again, being another wonderful human being.
Much appreciated, Six. And since we're in this thank you cascade, I just want to thank you with this picture. Do you remember where this is at? Do you know?
Oh yeah. This was was this this is Magic Live, right? This is
okay. Let me say why this is what happened. This is very cool moment for me because in the magic community, I'm always looked at like, oh yeah, the guy that does the social stuff, right? Like, he's the social magic guy, right? And in the greatest stage of magic conferences in the world, right? you got a wonderful invitation to have some minutes on stage, right? This is Magic Live in 2016.
Yes.
And this is one of the coolest moments that I can remember for me. I was not there, obviously.
Yeah.
And I had not met you yet in person.
No.
We had met on the internet, but
Yeah.
not in person. And some of my friends were there. And I remember that at some random point in the middle of the night, someone started texting me, and a couple of people like, "Hey, cool! Look at this! So cool, so cool! You got mentioned, and the work you're doing is right here." And from a bunch of different people, and it was because you were standing in Magic Life stage, talking about Magicians Without Borders and the work that we do. And
Yeah.
you said something about Carlos Lopez and
Yeah.
Magicians Without Borders. And that moment for me was so cool to have, people texting me of saying, you were mentioned in the stage of Magic Live. And it was such a cool moment for me that I just wanted to thank you for it, for, allowing me to live it, which was just a wonderful moment. So thank you so much for your also your commitment to the organization and all that you've done, all the great moments that you have had this kids live, and a bunch of others that I have lived with you, but this one was something that I wanted to share.
Oh, thank you so much. And for people who don't know, Magic Live is the magicians. It's the #1 magic convention in the world. I mean, the only other one close would be FISM, but that's more of a competition than a convention. People go there more to compete. It is a convention too, but really Magic Live, especially in the States, it's Magic Live. And over 2,000 attendees. And I was hanging backstage with Lance Burton. He bought me donuts. He went and got some donuts and brought them for me. Like, yeah, I got some donuts. Hey, you want a donut? I'm hanging out backstage eating donuts with Lance Burton, who's one of the greatest magicians to ever live. Got invited to a party at Chris Kenner's house, and David Copperfield was there. And anybody you can think of, who's who, was there in the audience. And it was the most nerve-wracking moments of my life. I am backstage freaking out next to Lance Burton, having to walk out in front of 2,000 people. I think it was like 1,000 per group. They broke it up into two sessions. And I was on stage with Luis Pedrahita, who's an incredible magician from Spain. Mike Caveney was the MC, who's an incredible magic historian and just a fantastic performer himself. Lance Burton was the opening act. I mean, I can go on with the list of people, and it was just absurd to be a part of that list. And I mean, the only thing that could have made it better was having you guys next to me in that moment. But it was incredible.
Wow.
Cool.
Yeah.
So cool, Six. So this has been so fun. I wish we could do this more often. So maybe we will. We don't know. Maybe we'll have another one of these conversations with you.
Do we have time for me to just say one last thing?
We have all the time in the world, Tom. Go ahead.
I really think what Six and Devante did in El Salvador took that first really simple education program that I was doing and took it to another level that inspired me to see this as something that could happen around the world. And now it happens in Colombia and Costa Rica and El Salvador and Brazil and South America and India, 2 programs and it really, really, really was because of what Six and Devante showed me was possible with what they did in El Salvador. So thank you, Six. And it's been a treat being with you tonight.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Only thing we're missing are those giant margaritas. I wish we had some more of those.
Yeah. And Devante, maybe we'll have to have Devante.
You have to get him on. Absolutely. Yeah. I'll tell him. I'll text him right now. Make sure I reach out to Carlos and get on here. It'll be fun.
Sure.
I'll jump back in for that one too.
Yes, definitely. We'd love to have both of you here. So this is the end. We're going to end this conversation now. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for everybody that is listening to this later on the podcast or that was live here on Facebook. We're going to post the video on YouTube a little bit later. So thank you, everybody. And this is the end of Magicians Without Borders Conversation, episode 5. Goodbye, Six. Goodbye, Tom.
See you guys.
Thank you, Carlos. Thank you, Six.